I never thought I'd hear my wife of 15 years plan my destruction over a glass of Chateau Margaux. He's weak, dull, a pushover. We'll say he's mentally unfit, unstable from grief. I've already been telling friends he talks to himself and forgets where he is. My sister Veronica's cruel laugh pierced through the speakers of my laptop. Perfect. Once he's declared incompetent, I'll manage the estate and you'll get the cash flow. The fool won't even know what hit him. I sat motionless in my study, watching the video feed from the hidden camera I'd installed in Veronica's penthouse just 3 days prior. My suspicions had been right. The whispers, the sudden meetings, the way they both fell silent whenever I entered a room. It hadn't been paranoia after all. My father, Charles Worthington Sr., had been dead for barely a month. The reading of his will had left the entire $15 million estate to me, his only son. The man who had stayed by his side through the cancer, who had managed his affairs when he could no longer do so, who had held his hand when he took his final breath. And now my wife and sister were plotting to take it all away. I closed the laptop with a gentle click and stared out the window at the sprawling grounds of Worthington Manor. The estate my father had built with decades of hard work, the legacy he had entrusted to me. "So this is how it's going to be," I whispered to myself, a cold clarity washing over me. My grieving was over. A different emotion took its place, one I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. My name is James Worthington. At 48, I had built what I thought was a respectable life. After a successful but unfulfilling career in investment banking, I'd returned home 5 years ago when my father's health began to decline. I managed the family's various business interests while caring for him, finding unexpected contentment in the quieter pace of life. Angela had been less enthusiastic about the move from our Manhattan apartment to the countryside estate in Connecticut. She'd built her identity around being the wife of a successful finance executive, hosting dinner parties for the right people, attending the right events. The woman I'd fallen in love with at 30 had always had ambition, but I'd mistaken it for drive rather than raw hunger for status and wealth. "It's temporary," I'd promised her. "Dad needs me." Temporary became permanent. My father's health fluctuated, with momentary improvements giving way to steeper declines. Angela's resentment grew alongside his deterioration. "We're wasting our lives in this mausoleum," she'd complain, gesturing around the historic mansion with its old-world elegance. "For what? So Charles can die surrounded by his precious antiques?" I should have seen it then, the contempt in her eyes, not just for our situation, but for me, for my loyalty, for the very qualities she'd once claimed to love. My sister Veronica had always been distant. 10 years my junior, she'd left for Europe after college and established herself as a minor socialite, flitting between Paris and Milan, always with a new wealthy boyfriend and a new dramatic crisis requiring financial assistance. Dad had continued to support her lifestyle with a generous allowance, despite her absence during his illness. I never begrudged her that money. Family was family after all. How naive I had been. When Dad finally passed, I felt hollowed out, but at peace. I had done right by him. He had died knowing he was loved. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly the vultures would circle. Veronica flew in for the funeral, all designer black and practiced tears. Angela suddenly became the grieving daughter-in-law, organizing the reception with efficiency she hadn't shown in years. They whispered in corners, made phone calls from the garden when they thought I couldn't hear. Started having regular lunches together despite having barely tolerated each other before. That's when I first suspected something was wrong. The day I overheard Angela on the phone. "Yes, the old man finally kicked it. Now we just need to handle the other problem." I ordered the surveillance equipment that afternoon. After discovering their plot, I began noticing things I'd been blind to before. How Angela's eyes never lit up when I entered a room anymore. How she'd check her phone whenever Veronica texted, then make excuses to call her back from another room. The way she studied me when she thought I wasn't looking, not with love, but with calculation. I installed more cameras, placed audio recorders in strategic locations, created a secure cloud server where all footage was automatically uploaded. I became a spy in my own home, and what I learned broke whatever remained of my heart. I never loved him, Angela told Veronica over lunch 3 weeks after Dad's funeral. He was safe, stable, his family had money. Do you know how boring it's been? 15 years of the same missionary position life? At least when he was working in the city, I had freedom. Veronica sipped her martini. Well, soon you'll have freedom and money. The best combination. Their plan was meticulous. Angela would begin spreading rumors about my mental state. My grief over Dad had tipped me into instability. I was forgetting things, talking to myself, having angry outbursts. Veronica would express concerned sisterly worry to our family's social circle. They would file for guardianship, presenting a united front of loving family members concerned for my well-being and the preservation of the estate. Dr. Matthews owes me a favor, Angela said. He'll sign whatever evaluation we need. And I've already spoken to Richards at the firm, Veronica added. He says with the right documentation we can have this wrapped up in 3 months. Richards, my father's attorney for 30 years. Another betrayal to add to the list. I sat in my study that night, watching the recordings, a glass of Dad's favorite scotch in my hand. I thought about confronting them, about raging and demanding explanations, about throwing Angela out and telling Veronica to never return. But then, in the cold light of my laptop screen, I saw how they laughed about me, how they mocked my grief, how they saw me as nothing but an obstacle. He's always been weak, Veronica said. Even as a kid, Dad knew it too. Why do you think he never gave him any real responsibility until he was desperate and dying? Angela nodded. He's so pathetically eager to please, always trying to do the right thing. No backbone. Well, his weakness is our opportunity, Veronica raised her glass. To the future Worthington estate managers. That night, I made my decision. I would not confront them. I would not rage or plead or defend myself. I would destroy them. The next morning, I began my performance. I shuffled into the kitchen in my robe, though I'd normally be dressed by 7. I stared vacantly at the refrigerator for a full minute before Angela asked if I was okay. Oh, yes. I was just thinking about Dad. He liked orange juice. I took out the milk instead and poured it into my coffee cup rather than the cereal bowl. Angela's eyes lit up with barely concealed excitement. James, honey, that's milk. Your coffee's over there. I blinked slowly. Right. Of course. Then I added, as if to myself, Dad always said the morning light confused him too. Over the next few weeks, I carefully escalated my symptoms. I left the stove on. I called Angela by my mother's name. I stared at family photographs for uncomfortable lengths of time. I began taking walks at odd hours and returning with my clothes slightly disheveled. Angela documented everything. I found her taking photos of the mess I deliberately left in my study. She recorded conversations where I seemed confused or agitated. She saved text messages where I sent nonsensical responses. Meanwhile, I was building my own case. I hired a private investigator to look into Dr. Matthews, Angela's cooperative psychiatrist. I consulted with a different law firm in New York, one with no connections to my family. I had every recording forensically verified and organized chronologically. I arranged for several respected neurologists to examine me, secretly of course, and document my perfect mental health. I even reached out to my old friend Michael Harrington, now a judge, for a private lunch. I didn't tell him specifics, but I asked hypothetical questions about guardianship hearings and what evidence would be considered most compelling. He was puzzled but helpful. When Angela and Veronica finally filed the guardianship petition, I appeared devastated. I wept. I begged Angela not to do this. I called Veronica, voice breaking, asking why my own sister would claim I was incompetent. "It's for your own good, James," Veronica said smoothly. "You're not well. We're worried about you." "This is temporary," Angela assured me, patting my hand with perfectly manicured fingers. "Once you're better, things can go back to normal." The court appointed an attorney for me, standard procedure in contested guardianship cases. Angela and Veronica didn't know I had already retained the services of Catherine Winters, one of the most ruthless estate litigators in the Northeast. They assumed I would be represented by some overworked court appointee who would see the mountain of evidence and recommend I submit to evaluation. The hearing was scheduled for June 15th. I marked the date on my calendar with a single word: justice. The competency hearing was held in the county courthouse, a stately building with marble columns that had stood for over a century. I arrived with my court-appointed attorney, a young man named David Cohen, who seemed nervous but earnest. What Angela and Veronica didn't know was that Cohen had been thoroughly briefed by Catherine Winters and was fully on board with our strategy. I played my part perfectly. I wore a slightly rumpled suit. I kept my gaze downcast and confused. I flinched at loud noises and muttered to myself occasionally. Angela kept casting concerned glances my way, the very picture of a devoted wife worried about her husband's mental decline. Veronica had dressed conservatively in a navy suit that screamed old money and respectability. She sat beside her attorney, a sleek predator named Richardson, who specialized in estate matters. I recognized him as one of my father's firm's junior partners. Another betrayal to add to the list. The courtroom was surprisingly full. Angela had done her work well. Many familiar faces from our social circle were present, no doubt expecting to witness my humiliation and subsequent loss of control over my father's estate. I spotted several of my father's old friends looking confused and concerned. Judge Eleanor Martinez entered, and we all rose. She was a formidable woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I'd never met her, but Catherine had assured me of her reputation for fairness and her intolerance for deception. The proceedings began. Richardson presented their case smoothly, painting a picture of a man undone by grief, unfit to manage his affairs or the substantial estate his father had left him. He introduced affidavits from concerned friends, describing my erratic behavior. He called Dr. Matthews to the stand, who solemnly testified that based on Angela's descriptions and his brief evaluation of me, I likely suffered from complicated grief disorder and possibly the early onset of a neurocognitive condition. Angela took the stand next, tears in her eyes as she described finding me wandering the grounds at night, talking to my dead father. How I'd forgotten our anniversary, how I'd become paranoid, installing security cameras around the house for no reason. This last part made me smile inwardly. If only she knew the true purpose of those cameras. "I love my husband," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "This is breaking my heart, but he needs help, and the estate needs protection until he's well again." Veronica testified about how different I seemed at the funeral, how concerned she'd been to hear about my decline from Angela, how, as my only living immediate family member, she felt duty-bound to step in. Judge Martinez listened impassively, occasionally making notes. When their case was complete, she turned to David Cohen. "Counsel for Mr. Worthington, your response?" Cohen stood. He appeared nervous, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, before I begin, my client has asked if he might address the court directly." Richardson smirked. Angela and Veronica exchanged triumphant glances. They thought I was about to help their case by displaying my confusion publicly. Judge Martinez looked at me carefully. "Mr. Worthington, are you certain you wish to speak?" I nodded and slowly made my way to the stand. I took the oath, my voice appropriately tremulous. I sat down, shoulders slumped, eyes downcast. Then I looked up, straightened my posture, and spoke in a clear, firm voice that made Angela's smile freeze on her face. "Your Honor, I am of sound mind and body. I am not suffering from complicated grief or cognitive decline. I am, however, the victim of a calculated conspiracy to deprive me of my legal rights and my inheritance." I paused. "And I can prove it." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Martinez banged her gavel once, restoring order. "Mr. Worthington, those are serious allegations. Do you have evidence to support them?" "I do, Your Honor." I gestured to Cohen, who nodded to a technician at the back of the room. The lights dimmed slightly, and a screen descended from the ceiling. Cohen handed me a remote. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to present Exhibit A." I pressed play. The screen filled with crystal-clear footage of Angela and Veronica in Veronica's penthouse, the very conversation I had discovered weeks ago. "He's weak, dull, a pushover. We'll say he's mentally unfit, unstable from grief. I've already been telling friends he talks to himself and forgets where he is." "Perfect. Once he's declared incompetent, I'll manage the estate, and you'll get the cash flow. The fool won't even know what hit him." Gasps filled the courtroom. Angela's face drained of color. Veronica lunged to her feet, but Richardson yanked her back down, his own expression horrified. I continued playing recordings, Angela coaching our household staff on what to say if interviewed about my condition, Veronica on the phone with Dr. Matthews discussing the evaluation he would write without ever properly examining me. The two of them laughing about how they would redecorate the manor once I was out of the way. And then, the most damning evidence. Angela in bed with Dr. Matthews, both of them naked, discussing how they would split their share of the money once the guardianship was established. "We'll need to keep him medicated," Matthews said, stroking her hair. "Nothing too strong, just enough to maintain the appearance of confusion." "Whatever it takes," Angela replied. "I've waited 15 years to be free of him. I can wait a little longer to make sure it's done right." Judge Martinez's expression had transformed from neutral to thunderous. When I finally stopped the playback, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. "Your Honor," I said quietly, "I have dozens more hours of similar recordings, all properly dated and authenticated. I've submitted myself to evaluation by 3 independent neurologists, all of whom have certified my mental competence." I handed Cohen a folder which he presented to the judge. I would also like to point out that Dr. Matthews is not a neurologist or a psychiatrist specializing in cognitive disorders. He is a general psychiatrist who, as the evidence shows, has been romantically involved with my wife for at least 6 months. Richardson was frantically whispering to Veronica, who had gone from pale to mottled red. Angela sat frozen, staring at me with naked hatred. Judge Martinez reviewed the medical reports, then set them down with deliberate care. "Mr. Cohen, do you have anything to add to your client's presentation?" Cohen stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Worthington would like to file counter-petitions against Mrs. Worthington and Ms. Veronica Worthington for fraud, defamation, conspiracy, and attempted financial elder abuse. Additionally, given the evidence of collusion, we request that Dr. Matthews be reported to the medical board for ethics violations and that Attorney Richardson be referred to the Bar Association for his role in presenting fraudulent evidence." Richardson shot to his feet. "Your Honor, I had no knowledge of any conspiracy. I was merely representing my clients based on the information they provided." Judge Martinez silenced him with a look. "Save it for the Bar Association, Counselor." She turned back to me. "Mr. Worthington, I must say in my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a blatant and calculated attempt to abuse the guardianship process. This court was very nearly used as an instrument to steal your rightful inheritance and deprive you of your freedom." She shuffled some papers, then looked up with steel in her eyes. "The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I am issuing a temporary restraining order preventing Angela Worthington and Veronica Worthington from accessing any Worthington family assets or entering Worthington Manor pending the resolution of Mr. Worthington's counterpetitions. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. Mr. Worthington, my sincerest apologies for what you've endured. As security approached to ensure Angela and Veronica kept their distance from me, I stood and walked toward the exit. Angela lunged forward, breaking away from her attorney's restraining hand. "You bastard!" she screamed. "You tricked us! You set us up!" I stopped and turned to face her, speaking just loudly enough for everyone in the now silent courtroom to hear. "I protected what was mine. You were always just visitors here." The fallout was swift and merciless. By that evening, the local press had the story. By the next morning, it had gone national. Worthington gold diggers caught in estate fraud plot. Angela's tearful testimony and our family photographs were juxtaposed with stills from the surveillance videos. Her affair with Dr. Matthews became public knowledge. Veronica's social media accounts were flooded with disgust and mockery. Dr. Matthews surrendered his medical license rather than face a public hearing. Richardson was placed on leave pending investigation. The friends who had signed affidavits about my mental state scrambled to distance themselves, claiming they'd been misled by Angela's concerns. I filed for divorce immediately. Given the circumstances and the prenuptial agreement Angela had signed, which included infidelity clauses, she received nothing. The judge was particularly unsympathetic when it was revealed that she had been transferring small amounts from our joint accounts to a private one for months, building a nest egg for her post-guardianship life. Veronica fared no better. I sued her for defamation and conspiracy, resulting in a $2.5 million judgment against her. When she couldn't pay, I placed liens against her penthouse and her vacation property in the Hamptons. She was forced to sell both, and the once proud socialite moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Queens. Her wealthy friends, always fair weather, stopped returning her calls. The criminal charges were another matter. Both Angela and Veronica were charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. Angela faced additional charges related to perjury and attempted financial elder abuse. Veronica, who had a previous suspended sentence for cocaine possession, was denied bail. I attended every court hearing, sitting silently in the back. I wanted them to see me, calm, composed, watching justice unfold. Angela was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Veronica, with her prior record, and as the instigator of much of the plot, received 3 years. When the media requested interviews, I declined politely but firmly. I had no interest in becoming a public figure or in prolonging the spectacle. The only statement I released was brief. Justice has been served. I now ask for privacy, as I honor my father's legacy. And I did honor that legacy. I established the Charles Worthington Sr. Foundation for Veterans Support, dedicating half of the estate to providing housing and medical care for veterans in need, a cause my father, a Korean War veteran himself, had always supported. I sold the manor. Too many bitter memories lingered in those halls now. I purchased a smaller but still elegant home by the coast, where I could watch the sunrise over the Atlantic and feel at peace. Sometimes in the quiet mornings, I wonder if I went too far, if I could have found a gentler way to expose their treachery, if the public humiliation and criminal charges were excessive. Then I remember Angela's voice. He's weak, dull, a pushover. I remember Veronica's cruel laugh. I remember how they plotted to drug me into compliance and steal not just my inheritance, but my dignity and freedom. No, I did not go too far. I went exactly as far as justice demanded. Last week, I received a letter from Angela, sent from prison. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope. I held it for a long moment, feeling its weight in my hands. Then I dropped it, unopened, into the fireplace and watched it burn to ash. Some betrayals can never be forgiven. Some wounds never heal. but I have found a strange peace in the aftermath of destruction. I am not the man they thought I was, weak, dull, a pushover. I am James Worthington, my father's son, and I protected what was mine. They were always just visitors here. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.